Warning: this video contains a frank discussion of child abuse, post-traumatic stress, gay conversion therapy, ABA therapy, and ableism. Viewer discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Karen Denserod, and I'm a proud autism mom. And I just love to show off how scientifically literate I am, because it makes me feel superior to those stupid, ignorant, religious poor people. Which is why I support subjecting my autistic 5-year-old to 40 hours a week of ABA therapy, because it's evidence-based. And you just know it's legit when they say how evidence-based something is, like when a cereal brags about how asbestos-free it is. Sure, I'm aware that scientific evidence is expensive and favors the opinions of the rich over those of a small, underemployed, disabled minority. And those minorities are often forced to advocate from a position of anecdotal, lived experience. But I don't care about that unless it's about vaccines, in which case those evil, rich pharmaceutical corporations just keep the lived experience of us autism moms down. But, in the interest of fairness, I'm going to break with the Autism Mom Code and listen to an actually autistic person who will describe their ABA survival horror stories. Now, he's a big dude with a really girly voice, so please make sure to make fun of him a lot. I want you to imagine that you are an autistic child. The world for you is strange and a little bit scary. Everyone else around you is so different from you. You have problems with tasks like riding a bike or holding a pencil. Bright lights, loud sounds, textures of clothing, all cause you potentially physical pain. Looking people in the eye and even talking to people may be mentally exhausting, and you may have difficulty speaking because of that. But there are some joys in your life. You may find that you rock or flap your hands or sing, and that this is incredibly peaceful and relaxing and fun, and it's like slipping into a warm bath or the well-worn spot on a comfortable old couch. But if you do this in front of other people, they might make fun of you. They might flap their hands in a kind of mocking, then point and laugh at you. And you may not even be able to control this behavior consciously. You might have to fight to avoid doing it in public. And then there are things you like to do. You have hobbies, but because hobbies provide a sense of comfort in a world that seems just maddeningly spontaneous to you, you are very interested in the comfort provided by your hobbies. And you want to share this joy of your hobbies with other people. Of course, everyone else finds this process brutal and exhausting, and they don't want to hear about your love of Pokemon for the 30th time today. So your parents, probably very well-meaning, probably hoping that you want to fit into society and make friends, which is a thing you simply cannot do, because when you approach other people, they act like random procedure-generating machines. They hate you, and you will never understand why. Well, they subject you to applied behavior analysis therapy, or ABA therapy, or just ABA. And this is going to depend a bit on how young you were when you started ABA therapy. If you were, let's say, between the ages of 2 to 5, you may get it 8 hours a day. If you weren't diagnosed with autism until you were in kindergarten, let's say, or early elementary school, you may receive therapy in school that is inspired by ABA, only to come home and receive ABA for several more hours. Thus, for you, ABA becomes like a full-time job. What is your life under ABA therapy like? You're watched all day, all throughout school, all throughout home therapy. You're asked to complete very stupid tasks that they never bothered to explain why you're doing. You're just expected to do them. And they reward you with treats, or maybe points towards something you like. Maybe it's new Pokemon cards. But if they see you doing any behavior they don't like, they punish you. Maybe a loss of playtime, or maybe they take away your Pokemon card. Now, It would be one thing to discipline children like this if they were engaged in bad behavior, but the behavior that you're getting punished for is behavior you can't help. It's flapping your hands because you're tired of communicating. And what they do is they grab your hands and put them into your lap and say, "Quiet hands." And it's one of the most disturbing feelings you'll ever experience. Like a complete loss of bodily autonomy. You're going to be forced to look into people's eyes no matter how much that hurts you. And you're going to be asked to suppress your interest in your hobbies. Your hobbies are bad. Your hobbies make other people reminded of how autistic you are. Now imagine going through that process every day, sometimes as much as 12 hours a day, for your entire childhood. And maybe by the end of it, you are completely identical to your neurotypical peers. You can behave completely in their world. And maybe you no longer even qualify as autistic because you can hold a conversation without your tics getting in the way. But you know what? It's incredibly exhausting. It's called masking. And you go through your day and you're just exhausted when you come home because you've had to spend the whole day pretending to be normal. But you probably have PTSD and you are terrified of that mask slipping. You're probably depressed, you probably have PTSD, and you can't go to a therapist because that's a trigger for your PTSD because of all the therapy you received. Maybe you're too afraid to have hobbies and you don't want to talk about anything you're interested in because you get a panic attack at the thought of someone thinking your hobby is a special interest. Those are probably the lucky ones. How many autistic children were trained to obey without reason, who were trained to put it up with it when they felt uncomfortable, who were victims of sexual abuse. This is the lived experience of pretty much every autistic child who was diagnosed as a child and for whom their parents were exposed to the standard treatments for autism. I know because this happened to me, but because the opinions of autistic people don't matter in their own self-advocacy, we had to wait until studies by neurotypical researchers confirmed what every autistic person could have just told you. ABA is abuse that doesn't work. The empirically demonstrated harms of ABA. So you've seen my intro and you know the sort of content I usually push, but every now and again I do some media reviews, and a couple of weeks ago I did 2 videos on the DuckTales Season 3 series finale. I did an emotional reaction sort of video, and I did a sober review sort of video. And I was honestly having to talk myself out of a panic attack about doing a second video because I did not want to be perceived as having an interest in children's cartoons, especially since I discussed it in a fairly serious manner as though the characters were real people, and because I mentioned the autism representation in Huey. And this is a thing that happens to me all the time, where I get panic attacks where people might think that I am having a special interest. So I will keep a mental check of the number of times I talk about something with different people. And I will do my best to downplay any kind of interest I might have in something. Even things I'm genuinely interested in, I must make sure that I don't come off as being too interested. I could never be able to do like a fan convention. And that's because I have panic attacks associated with my years of ABA therapy trying to break me of having special interests. The experience of having panic attacks for being perceived as autistic is a common thing that ABA survivors have experienced. Thankfully, we now have documented evidence of this that has been peer-reviewed and accepted. This study from 2018 looked at 470 autistic adults. The long and short of it, if you treat your child with ABA therapy, there's a 2 in 3 chance they will develop post-traumatic stress symptoms. There's a 1 in 2 chance they will develop diagnosable PTSD, and there's a 1 in 5 chance that your child will develop severe PTSD, compared only to about 25% of the normal population. Now, we want to be fair. These were surveys and not official diagnoses. And there was a bit of self-selection in the study where they recruited from autistic support groups, and it's possible that there may be a slightly higher presence of people who have been traumatized in those studies. But it is broadly consistent with what the lived experience of autistic people has been. Moreover, there have been other studies calling ABA abusive, and an investigation into the history of ABA shows that it was originally developed as a form of gay conversion therapy. Instead of punishing you for acting autistic, they punished you for acting gay, and they rewarded you for acting straight. Given how widely discredited conversion therapy is and the known harms of conversion therapy, the idea that it's okay to treat autistic kids the same way religious fundamentalists treat gay kids is kinda horrifying. Then there are the non-peer-reviewed studies, ABA therapists who have left and given testimonies about how they find it abusive, and perhaps one of the most moving of all, a dog trainer who condemned the practice of ABA and said if they performed ABA on dogs, it would be considered animal abuse. Well, that's just peachy, Mr. Girly Voice Man. But these, after all, are just your experience. What about all this evidence that ABA is based on? The so-called evidence for the effectiveness of ABA therapy. So ABA therapists love to flaunt how scientific their method is. And talking to ABA therapists, you need practically a thesaurus of their own technical dialogue, all of which boils down to essentially punish kids for behaving bad, reward kids for behaving good. So what is this evidence? Well, the typical ABA study goes something like this. Here's a group of 25 autistic kids. I'm going to take half of them, and I'm going to punish them for behaving in ways that I think are too autistic. I then go and measure and find out that, surprise, surprise, when you punish autistic kids for behaving in autistic ways, they stop engaging in those behaviors at a higher frequency than when I don't punish those kids. I'm going to go then publish this finding in an ABA-friendly journal where my methods won't be criticized. Importantly, there have been large-scale meta-studies of these studies, and while they will acknowledge a weak statistical effect, because, yeah, obviously punishing and rewarding kids will get you the kind of behavior you want, they find that the evidence is of very poor quality. Insufficient controls, insufficient sample size, bias on the part of the observers. So even the best case scenario for ABA is still really weak, and we'll talk about how that case gets even weaker in just a second. See, there was just recently this study that was published by the Department of Defense. Now again, it is in a technical report and not a peer-reviewed journal, and we haven't seen the full published data yet, but it is very promising for anti-ABA advocates like me. Essentially, in the largest study of ABA ever conducted, 3,700 participants, they found that ABA does not work, and the reason for this was they commissioned 2 independent meta-studies, like the ones I've just talked about. Both found weak evidence for ABA, and then their own internal data showed that, yes, there is that same weak statistical effect, but actually, they ran a correlation test, hours of ABA versus improvement. So this is why, ABA advocates make a big push for, let's do 40 hours a week instead of 20 hours a week for young autistic kids. and they found that there was no correlation between amount of ABA and the progress one received. It seems like the final nail is being put in the coffin of ABA as scientifically legitimate as we speak. That deserves a much more detailed breakdown, and I'm planning on doing that in the future, but for right now, just know that ABA is on its way out as having scientific legitimacy. Well, Mr. Smarty Pants, if there's so much evidence against ABA, and ABA is as abusive as you say, why is ABA still so popular? Well, near as I can figure, ABA culture is a cult. And I'm not being facetious about that either. An incredibly popular metric, increasing in popularity among people who study cults, is the BITE model, which lists 49 attributes common to dangerous cults. And by my calculation, ABA ticks off 34 of those 49 attributes of toxic cults. Well, this has been Karen the Autism Mom, interviewing some big guy with an incredibly girly voice who presented a cogent case of both moving personal experience about his suffering at the hands of the ABA movement and compelling evidence both of the lack of efficacy of ABA and that ABA does real damage. But as he's an actually autistic person, all of us autism moms have a moral obligation to ignore him and continue to push for this dangerous and ineffective therapy because, frankly, it makes us look like good, intelligent parents. Bye-bye, folks.